Welcome to Under the Rug at Work, where we shine light on things that are normally swept under the rug. Today, I'm chatting with Mark Jones about what happens when your inner critic wins. Mark's an author, speaker, journalist, and a mindset strategist. Thank you so much for joining me, Mark. It's a pleasure to chat with you.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole. It's so good to be here.
Can you share with us a little bit about your background and what led you to write the story code for people who might not have met you before?
Yes, of course. So I've just published my second book called The Story Code, and it's about how leaders can build their resilience and improve their influence by rewriting the stories they tell themselves. And look, it's a bit of a truism that when people go through really difficult times, we tend to want to do something with that,
Mm,
aside from recovering. You want to do something good in the world and help other people. And so it was for me. About well, 5, 6 years ago now, 2019, I had, long story short, a panic attack in the middle of my local Bunnings. Now, this was one of those pivot moments, and until that point in time, Mark Jones at that point, he was a 45-year-old middle-aged white bloke with 4 kids, wife, cracking mortgage in Sydney, 2 dogs, and then I'd been running a business for 10 years with my wife, a marketing communications agency, and so all of the pressures of the world and my responsibilities had been on my back for a long time. We'd been going through a couple of really difficult years in terms of the business. And I think something I thought I was doing okay, but actually I'd been just marching on, and blokes tend to do this. We just sort of keep going and don't stop and rest.
mm,
And so it really was this turning point where I had what amounted to my first ever panic attack in the middle of Bunnings, and I nearly kind of passed out. It was a shocking experience. I drove home. Don't do that if you're having a panic attack, but I did. And my wife looked after me. I was in tears. I ended up passing out and uh, had a couple of weeks off work. It was actually the beginning of a bit of a descent into clinical depression. And so I'm speaking with sort of, you know, the tone of an upbeat guy who's doing well, but really,
yeah.
I was in a really bad way for a long time, and I wasn't the person I thought I would ever be.
Mm,
Uh, the To answer your question, that became a point where I decided to lean into the struggles I was having as opposed to back off and run away. And
mm,
so I began this journey of figuring out, why did I get here? I had this expectation that by 45 I'd be doing much better than I actually was. This sort of confrontation with reality forced me to try and wake up. And so the book is actually about how you can rewrite the stories you're telling yourself, which at that time was, I'm doomed.
mm.
Um, I'm not going to make it. I'm not even the right leader for this company. All these dreams about my life are coming crashing down. And I didn't even want this panic attack and this burnout anyway. It's not even my identity. It's not how I think I am, right? And so being able to come around to acceptance, I obviously spent all the money on all the therapies and all of the people who help you in these times, and I encourage everybody to do that.
Yeah.
Um, but as a storyteller, as you know, in journalism for more than 10 years and also running my communications agency, I had this moment where I realized the storytelling techniques I use to tell other people,
Mm,
or that I use to help them become better stories, I actually started to use them on myself. Started doing all this research about narrative therapy and how we can apply storytelling techniques to our own healing journeys. That was the beginning of the story. It's kind of what led to this book. So, yeah, I've been through the ringer.
mm.
I've come out the other side, and I'm just a little bit wiser for it, maybe.
We are so good at hiding it though, right? And it's the expectations that we put on ourselves that we should be here and we should be there. And it's that kind of inner critic that no one else can hear. And we put that front on so that no one else feels it or thinks that we're a fraud. But it leads to pretty destructive things, right?
Yeah, so I think it's probably useful if maybe the listener and the viewer isn't aware of the way that this impacts us. The first thing we need to do is think about, well, firstly, what is the inner critic, and what are these stories we tell ourselves, and there's actually sort of three components. The first is the inner critic. I think of this like the annoying coworker. You've just been given an assignment or a job to do, and they come in and say, "You're no good at that." All right, just sort
Yeah.
of pop up out of nowhere. Right, you suck. That sort of
Yeah.
thing. Um, and then so that's one part of it, and then the cousin or the sparring partner or partner in crime, for the inner critic, is your limiting beliefs. And these are values that we hold very deeply. I am not the sort of person who can, right?
Mm,
I will never be good at. These are identity markers, and so our limiting beliefs actually hold us back.
yeah.
So that's the second part. The third part, is actually how we see ourselves in the world. It's our inner narrative, right? Am I in a rags to riches storyline here, or am I the rags to rags storyline? Like there's a great skit from Flight of the Conchords where they talk about being on a rags to rags story. Anyway, uh, how do you see yourself as the character in your own story, this narrative? And what's your archetype? In other words, what sort of person are you? So they're all the things that play together. And the danger, to your point, is if you let that run riot,
Mm,
it's self-destructive.
mm.
And no amount of doing all the right things in the rest of your life is going to help the fact that you're actually sabotaging your success.
Yeah, and those kind of things really fuel burnout and disengagement in workplaces, right? How can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, as a business owner myself, and been running the company here in Sydney for 15 years. Um, well, actually, as an aside, I've stepped out and focused on this writing now, but managed by our general manager Paula, who's doing an amazing job. But up until recently, running a business, um, the the thing that's always fascinated me about running a company is that it is a uniquely exciting and terrifying experience all at the same time. The trap that we can get into from a mindset point of view is that if I just keep pushing on, if I just keep barreling on, I'll get there. That's the path to burnout. And that's what happened to me, as I was explaining. I didn't really understand the concept of self-care. And I've spent a lot of money on psychologists and therapists, as I mentioned, and they all annoyingly kept bringing me back to the most basic, simple things that everybody should do but doesn't do when you're in a point of stress, right? And they're the three pillars of self-care. Well, there's actually four, but there's one missing. I'll get to that. You've
Yeah.
got to look after your sleep. You sleep well, you've got to eat well,
Mhm.
and you've got to exercise well. Because you go to anybody and they'll tell you to get those sorted. And they're
Yeah.
pillars for a reason because they hold you up.
Yeah.
But the fourth one I discovered in my research that we all have, and few of us think about in a leadership context, is the concept of self-talk. Now, self-talk is actually the pillar that sustains the entire lot. And I was clueless to this, right? So I had my self-talk running wild. I was eating poorly because, you start when you're stressed, you seek comfort or food's tasty, maybe a
Yeah.
cheeky beer or two or more. Like you don't exercise because you're too tired and you're working late, right? These are all the signs of someone burning out. And we think we can just carry on. Turns out you can't. Your body keeps score, as the book says.
It does, and my business partner says that as well. Because we just have to get through these things. Oh yeah, it sounds like you're talking to me at the moment, and I the self-talk is such a big factor because I remember when I burnt out, and I think self-talk had a huge part to play in me not falling over earlier because I would tell myself it's fine. We just need to get over this hump. We just have to do this. We just have to launch this program. We just have to get through this tough patch. And it got to a point 12 months later when I was working 12-hour days, no lunch breaks, most weekends just to keep on top, that the mountain came crashing down on me. And I have that forever optimist view. So I know
Mm,
I can catch myself out in that. But same thing, when I burnt out, the sleep, it was so important. The
yeah.
food, I go straight to chips. And the exercise definitely need to do that. Well, we know we feel better when we're doing those things
Yeah.
positively, right? And
Yeah.
I feel sometimes like we struggle a bit because society is very much about being busy and being, stress is just normal. But what's the difference between that normal stress and the kind of self-talk that becomes dangerous?
So I see all of this through a storytelling lens, but to
Mm,
borrow from what we know in neuroscience and psychology is that there is normal stress in the day-to-day life, which might be running late to a meeting. So you sort of feel it, well, or for some of us running late to the airport or whatever it is, right? That's stressful, right? And we kind of get through it and then we get back on with our day. The chronic stress or the underlying damaging stuff is where it's constant, it's always on. It's like you're permanently in fight or flight mode, and that's when it gets really, really scary for me. Like, my adrenal glands were burned out. I was drinking too much coffee, and I was just, too wired, and it takes a long time to sort of to unwind from all of that. Um, it's it's very hard to catch yourself when you're caught up in that place.
yeah.
I found the workplace issue, that we're touching on here is an interesting one to me, and I know that you do a lot of work in sort of psychosocial safety. Um, this is a much bigger issue than I think many people realize, particularly in leadership and management circles,
Mm,
because if you have people who are experiencing that, you do have a responsibility, as you know from the legislation, to create a psycho-socially safe environment.
yeah.
And we're seeing more companies now starting to get dragged through the courts. Um, but what struck me, beyond just the threat, so the big stick, but it's not quite a carrot, but it's a motivator for a lot of managers, is that if somebody is away from work because of a psychosocial injury, they're burnt out, they've had all sorts of stresses or some sort of negative experience that really, pushed them sideways, they tend to have about 4 times as much time off work than somebody with a physical injury. And again, you might know that statistic too, but we're talking, some can be up to more than 30 weeks away from
Mm,
work. Well, that costs money. That's lost productivity. It has a flow on sort of a cultural thing. So there's a stewardship that's required by leaders to understand this.
mm,
And even worse than that, you may be aware Gallup published their annual state of, it's almost like their state of the union, but their state of well-being around the globe. And we've seen day-to-day stress. So somebody at work experiencing stress rise steadily over the past 15 years, while at the same time, the sense of well-being has declined for 15 years. So here we are in a society that's constantly burning out. Australians, by and large, more than 60% of us are burnt out already this year. We're among the top 4 most burnt out nations. So us, the Kiwis, and the North Americans, we're all the worst. Well, I'd like to think we're better, but we're not. And I think, to your point, it's because we live in the hurry society. We're not
mm,
actually understanding or placing value in rest,
mm.
and there's too many pressures coming in at us. So, this is really fueling a burnout crisis. We're not the lucky country. We're the burned out country, the burnout nation, right? And it's not okay.
It's not, and it's not a title you want to win at.
No, no.
Have you got
Yeah.
any tips for leaders who might see this kind of behavior or activity not only in themselves but in their team? Anything that they can do to help shift that?
Yeah, so the story code itself, the code is actually an acronym for a long-term process that you can go through, that I went through and that I take people through. I'll mention it briefly, but we won't have time to unpack it all. But the C stands for challenge. So you've got to challenge the inner critic. You've actually got to listen to the inner critic and your limiting beliefs and say, well, what is that story? Bring it out of the subconscious
Mm,
and really understand the power of it in it, what it's doing to you. Then overwrite is where we look at the third strand we spoke about, which is your inner narrative and the storytelling or narrative archetype that, am I the hero in the hero's journey? Or so in other words, understanding this picture and set of expectations you have for life and start working on a new story. The D is deciding. So you're going to decide to go from an old story about being broken and burnt out to a new story. So you start writing a new script, which is
hmm
enormously exciting. And then E is for encode. And encode is where you make a commitment to daily habits. And because you don't change anything without habits. And there's look, there's James Clear's Atomic Habits I recommend to everybody. It's an incredible book. The point is you need small little daily habits that all build up like compound interest. So eating well, sleeping well, exercising well, and getting yourself talk. There's a whole bunch of things. So look, there's that, but the simple thing that I teach people to be more present in the day is I call this a mirror moment. And you might just sort of picture sort of looking at your car rearview mirror,
Mm.
and it's that moment of self-reflection. There's three components to a mirror moment, which is a way to catch that negative story, that inner critic in the moment. So you want to catch, flip, and then anchor. So
Mhm.
catching it is, what is it? Like, what is that thing? The flip it, and this is the theory of change. If you flip and look for what's the positive opposite? So I can't do that. Well, yes, I can. And then the anchoring is the third, the anchor, that's the fun bit. That is, I'm not just giving myself a bumper sticker cheer up, right? I'm saying to myself, I'm anchoring this in, I can do this because I remember a time in my own past where I know that I've done this. So what
Mhm.
you're actually doing is giving yourself a bit of a talking to,
Yeah.
but it's based on the insights from narrative therapy, which says you are the expert in your own story.
Mm.
And so you can choose to rewrite your story or remind yourself of the truth from your own story. I have done this before or something like it.
Yeah.
And so I know that that inner critic is lying. So that mirror moment, that's sort of pivotal. And it's one
Mm.
of those day-to-day habits. You can catch it, flip it, and then
Mhm.
anchor it.
Love that. And it sounds like your book is full of tools. I'm really excited to read it. Um,
Absolutely.
it I just want to end on a question around your experience. And it was only International Men's Day a couple of days ago, and we often breeze over that. There's often not a lot of acknowledgement and recognition, and there's a lot of guys going through exactly what you went through,
Yeah.
in that before burning point. Is there any advice or tips, or anyone that's listening today that may be feeling like that? Anything that you've got to say to support them, or any tools or tips?
Oh, my starting point is if you're feeling a bit off, go and see a GP.
Yeah.
Like, don't even think about it, just book one.
Hmm.
And even if it's to have the GP tell you, look, you probably should just have a bit of a lie down. But, because that's the mentality is that for a lot of men, unless it's really broken, I'm not going to do much. But if you know that not something's not quite right, you should act on that. And a GP will do a quick test, the DAS-21 test, which is a sort of a mental health well-being score. So that's
Hmm.
a really great place to start. Of course, all the other advice is just go and talk to a mate. And
Mm.
then from a sustainability or an ongoing point of view, try and think about male friendships. And I'm talking to blokes here. Like, think about male friendships that you already have that you trust and that you think you could go a bit deeper. And
Yeah.
by that, I mean just having the courage to take the conversation a few steps deeper, whether it's at the pub, the house, or wherever you're at. I
Mm.
actually get together with a group of guys once a month. We call the group Fire and Meat, because guess what? We sit around a fire and we eat meat. Does what there's in the tin. And I shared every month, and one person will share their story, and they're sort of given the floor. Um, and the great thing about this is because men love to tell a big long story, and you're like, when are they going to get to the point? Well, if there's a whole bunch of blokes sitting around, they don't care. Like, just keep going. We're waiting. We're here. Like, it's the best ever. It's so liberating. Anyway, listen to me going on. And so the thing is, in this group, I shared my story about burnout and the depths of depression and my recovery. And it's not a common story among men, but there would have been 16 blokes there on this particular night. And I asked at the end, like, how many of you relate to my story and what I'm going through? How much has this negative self-talk impacted your life? And I kid you not, I was, all but two. So 14 out of the 16 put their hands up and confessed to, I'm really struggling. And men's mental health is I think really underrated in terms of um, the impact it has not just on the men, but families and beyond. While I'm not a men's mental health campaigner per se, I'm really passionate about it. And we don't need to go into all the gory statistics, but you
Yeah.
probably know this too. But one of the stats from Gotcha for Life, which is a great um, charity in this space that I've worked with, there's about 9 suicides a day, and 7 of which are men.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's the grim reality. And so, from my point of view, it's not okay.
Mm.
We need more men who are willing to have that conversation that goes a bit further, that are
Yeah.
willing to hang around with blokes and yeah, have some fun, like be a bit stupid and keep the comedy levels high, but then also like don't be scared to ask your mate like a few proper questions,
Mm.
and don't plan it, don't script it, but listen, because it's too important. And I think we've got to break down this taboo that um, men and women, people of any gender and age just have to keep soldiering on because, we are seeing this burnout crisis and it impacts workplaces, it impacts families and communities.
Yeah. It does. It's such a wide-reaching effect, and most people want to help someone else. So just saying, hey, like Simon Sinek says, have you got 8 minutes? If we're struggling, it's 8 minutes is all it takes to have that conversation. And I'd love to learn more about it and connect you with some of the other incredible guys that I think you will get on really well with that are in this space as well. So we'll do
Right.
that once we jump off. But for people who are listening, obviously there's a lot of value in what you share and the book. How can people connect with you and learn more or even grab the book themselves?
Well, the good news is my name, Mark Jones, is very easy to spell, and I'm with a K, not a C, the proper way. And so it's markjones.au. No .coms. Just go to my website. There's a link to my book. You can, see videos of what I do and stuff like that. But that's probably the easiest place. And find me on LinkedIn as well. I'm also on there.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing, Mark. Thank you for writing the book. I cannot wait to listen to it. I believe you're recording the audio version at the moment. Is that
Yeah,
right?
I'm literally in the studio as we speak. I'm halfway through recording the audio book. There's been a lot of demand for it, so I'm finally
Great.
getting around to it, which is exciting.
Wonderful. Well, really appreciate you coming on and sharing. Thank you so much. And
Absolutely.
for listeners out there, if you found this conversation valuable, please subscribe and share it. And we'll see you next time on Under the Rug at Work, where we continue to shine light on issues that are too often overlooked.